Good afternoon, and thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for joining for the webinar today. Today's topic is diabetes reversal with millets. Is it a miracle food or misunderstanding? Given that there's a lot of push from the government of India, and we do think rightly so, for millets, given the advantages that it actually gives, and also the environmental impact, we just want to take a slightly closer look at how particularly useful is it for a diabetic. As a result, we decided to have this webinar. I'm Dheeraj, CEO of Navrelia Foods. We at Navrelia Foods are introducing healthy and science-backed foods into Indian market. As a first product, we introduced Ruby Roti Mix, which is one of India's lowest glycemic index roti. As part of our education initiative, we are hosting a series of webinars with various guests. Today, we have a couple of excellent speakers in Dr. Raghugadrigada and Mehak Dingra. This webinar will last for 1 hour with a couple of short presentations from both the panelists and an audience Q&A at the end. So throughout the webinar, if you have any questions that you'd like the panelists to answer, please do type in your questions, and we'd really urge you to type them in the Q&A part of it. Otherwise, it will be extremely tough for us to keep monitoring the chat. With that, let me introduce our guests. Dr. Raghugadrigada is a founding member of Navrelia Foods and a practicing cardiologist at Emory University Hospitals in Atlanta. He's passionate about scientific interventions to improve public health. Most recently, he started a fitness program for women in peri- and postmenopausal phase. His current research work has actually culminated in creating Ruby Roti and forming this company, Navrelia Foods. And our other panel member is Ms. Mehak Dingra. Mehak Dingra is a certified diabetes educator and a type 1 diabetes coach. She's founder of Unstoppable Type 1 Academy and hosts the podcast Shots and Pricks. While she's a lawyer by training, her personal battle with type 1 diabetes culminated in her working full-time with diabetics and helping them better manage the disease. She likens her story to be that of an enduring spirit and not one of loud victories. So she's all about sustainable, small changes and making daily improvements. With this guiding philosophy, she aims to help others find balance and joy in life, moving beyond the constraints of diabetes. So before I invite Mehak to actually share her presentation, if you haven't really joined the WhatsApp community yet, we just share that QR code in the chat itself. Please do join at your own convenience to get more details about future webinars and more educated content. With that, Mehak, all yours.
Thank you so much, Dheeraj. I hope my screen is visible to all of you. Good evening, everyone. If you can see my screen, quickly type good evening in chat box so that I know you can see my screen, hear me, and see me clearly. Quickly type good evening, everyone. Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. So let's understand this first question. How many of you believe food causes diabetes? If you believe food causes diabetes, type FOOD food in chat box. If you believe food causes diabetes, quickly type FOOD food in chat box. Great, wonderful. Thank you so much. So for all of those who are replying, all those who are not replying, I can see you. Quickly reply. Great. See, we are going to talk about diabetes reversal without giving some exercises to finger. It will not happen. I want you all to reply quick. Wonderful. Okay. And how many of you believe that food can only cure diabetes? If you believe food can cure diabetes, type CURE cure in chat box. Type CURE cure in chat box. Okay, great. Wonderful. I'll be answering both of these questions in the end of the session, not right now. Okay. So first of all, thank you so much for joining today. I know it's a weekend, it's evening time, but still you have taken time for this webinar. It means a lot to all of us. Thank you so much. Now let's understand what are millets. Anybody who can tell me what are millets? Quickly type in the chat box, what are millets? Why are millets called superfood, miracle food? What are millets?
Meg, there's a poll that we created, right? Should we launch the poll?
I'll come on that later.
Okay.
Cereals, okay. Healthy food, okay. Okay. Now let's understand millets just like any other grain, are small seeded grains. Millets are grains. And what are the other kind of grains we all eat? So if you can see, we see dalia, we see rice, we see rajma, we see some other dals. These are all grains. So if millet as a grain can cure diabetes, can all of these other grains also cure diabetes? Because it's grain, they are from the same family. So do you think that rice can cure diabetes? Why? Millet and grains, they belong to the same family. Portion control, okay? Depends on the level of carbohydrate. That's interesting. Mohit, I'm asking people to write in. I want to write. You can mute your chat. Okay. Different nutrient index. Some very interesting. Okay. Glycemic index. Wonderful. Some very interesting inputs are coming in. Okay. Okay. So let's see. We'll be breaking all these myths that you have around millets and its ability to cure diabetes. Millets are referred as smart food. Okay. I get it. Okay. Now this, you can put the poll question, Dheeraj. Okay, there's a poll question for all of you. Do you eat millets regularly? Quickly put in yes or no. Oh, you are not, if you are able to see the poll,
Yeah,
quickly answer.
we are getting a response. We'll just wait a few more seconds and then close the poll.
Okay, okay.
Okay, good. We're going to close the poll now. And poll. Okay, share results. Okay.
Okay, 62% people said no. Okay. Now the next question is way more important. All those who have answered yes, you need to answer this question. All those who have answered no, we need to know what people think. Okay, so Dheeraj, do you have the next poll question?
Yes, just a second. Just putting that up. So yeah, it should go live now. Yeah.
Okay, so this question is, will millets control or reverse diabetes? All those who are saying yes, quickly type in. And all those who are saying no have just heard me that millet is a grain. Renu, I am not sure if people will understand Hindi here. Everyone, I am comfortable in Hindi, English both. So अभी सबसे पहले बस ये बताओ कि मिलेट्स डायबिटीज क्योर कर सकता है या नहीं अपने हिसाब से.
Yeah. Okay. So we have similar amount of participation already. Just 5 more seconds and then I'll share the poll results.
Okay, everyone, I'll be speaking in English as well as Hindi so that both the audience get answers. Okay.
Okay, this is interesting. Yeah.
78% people believe millet, which is a grain, can cure diabetes. But you have still not answered me. Why millet? Okay, let's see. I'll ask this question again. Dheeraj, can we redo this poll by the end of the session?
Yes, yeah, we can. Yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. So let's move to the next thing. What are some of the commonly eaten millets in India? I want you all to quickly type in chat box while I take you through the commonly eaten millets in India. Some of the commonly eaten millets are finger millet ragi, which people love and call it as a miracle food for diabetes. Foxtail millet, barnyard millet, kodo millet, little millet, pearl millet, sorghum, brown top, porso millet. Quickly type in, okay, everybody's rating. Ragi, bajra, jowar. Oh my God. Okay. Kodo, quinoa. Quinoa is not considered. Okay, finger millet, foxtail, ragi. Okay. Now, if millet can actually cure diabetes, why India is leading in diabetes all over the world? This is the prevalence of diabetes in India all over the world. India is the most millet eating country. India is the most millet eating country. Still, India is leading in diabetes. Have you ever thought so? Why? But there are people who are eating only millets and still they have diabetes. Pani puri and rice. Okay, great, nice. Now let's understand, when you are eating millet or you are eating any grain, what is the blood sugar spike and what is the normal post meal spike? Let's understand blood sugar spike. Okay, let's understand blood sugar spike and then we'll come on junk food also. Okay. When you eat something, your blood sugar rises, whether you have diabetes or you don't have diabetes. Everybody's blood sugar rises, right? If the rise in the blood sugar is more than 30 to 50 mgdl from your pre-meal levels, the chances are your body is saying that the food is high glycemic. The chances are your body is saying that the food is high glycemic. Now, what is glycemic? I'll be covering. So if what is normal spike? So if let's say if your pre-meal sugars are 120 and after that you go to 150, 170 after 1 to 2 hours, it's acceptable because it's the spike of 30 to 50 points. But if your sugars are 120 and they spike to 220 after eating anything normal, that means your body is telling that that food is giving you major spikes. And for people who have these continuous major spikes, they attract diabetes, or they are known as pre-diabetic in India. When your body has to continuously go through or deal through those spikes, that causes diabetes. Now, let's understand, how does food help us decide whether there be spike or not spike? So there is something, any guesses what helps us decide whether there will be a spike or no spike? What helps decide? Glucose, okay. It's the glycemic index of the food which helps you decide whether this particular food will spike or not spike. So let's see what is glycemic index. Let's understand what is glycemic index. Wow, some of the very good people are sitting there. So some of the good answers are coming in chat box. Glycemic index tells person, I'm sorry, percentage of carbohydrate. Please let me repeat this. Percentage of carbohydrate that turns into glucose in the first 2 hours after the food is eaten. Again, it is percentage of the carbohydrate. So if a food has a carbohydrate of, let's say, 70, if the food has a carbohydrate of 70 grams and GI of 55, okay, let me repeat. If the food has 70-gram carbohydrate and GI of 55, that means 55% of that 70-gram carbs converts into glucose in the first 2 hours after the food is eaten. Okay. Now, okay, this I have already covered, so I'll just skip this. Now, what are the levels of glycemic index? There are 3 levels of glycemic index. First is low glycemic index. Anything which has glycemic index less than 55 will not give you major spike. It will keep more stable sugars. You will see a graph like this. Anything which has medium glycemic index, that is 55 to 70, will give you some spike. You will mellow it down. It may give you a little more spike and it will come down. But when food has high glycemic index, it will give you major spikes. Now, one thing that we all ask is, does this spike only come to people who have diabetes? No. These spikes come to those also who don't have diabetes. And the bigger problem is that when these spikes are continuous for those who don't have diabetes, the excess spike put pressure on your pancreas to overproduce insulin to deal with these spikes. And when there is pressure on those pancreas, poor pancreas, what happens? If you keep putting pressure on one of your employees, okay, I'm putting pressure, what will happen one day? What will that employee do? What will that employee do? Quickly answer, what will that employee do? If you keep putting pressure on, one day it will stop working or it will give up. Leave job, quit, rebel. That's what pancreas are doing. Because you are giving them major spikes, excess work every day by these giving spikes, eventually they say, sorry, I'm done, I'm getting weak, I'm getting tired, or may even stop working. And that's how diabetes come in our life. Insulin resistance is, Chinmay, when the pancreas are overproducing insulin, but the body is not absorbing that insulin. That's different. Here I'm telling you, when you overwork your pancreas because of the glucose spike. Okay. Now let's understand. A lot of you said that millets have low glycemic index. So let's see some of the millets they have covered. Jowar flour, 77 glycemic index. Ragi flour, 54 to 104. Wheat flour, 62. Most of the millets are not only high glycemic, but also their carbohydrate level is more than 70% per 100 gram. It's a very major misconception that millets are low in carbohydrate. Like today, I was talking to one of the doctors, and he suddenly said, I like to put people on low carb diet. And I asked, what do you give them if they're vegetarian? He said, I give them millets. Millets are low carb. And I was so shocked that people believe that millets are low carb. Millets have proper carbohydrate. It is not at all low carbohydrate. It is not low glycemic index. Now, does that mean should we stop eating millets? Absolutely not. I'm not at any point saying that you need to stop eating millets. What I'm trying to say is we need to get out of this myth that millet is going to cure your diabetes. There's a difference between understanding and doing something. There's a difference between making you fooling people to make them do something. That is what millet industry has suddenly turned into. A very interesting case came where a mother is feeding millet biscuits, millet noodles, millet pasta to their daughter, thinking, oh, she'll not have, her sugars will not go high. And every time she's eating these things, the sugars are going high, because millet is grain in itself. So this is very important to understand that what is glycemic index of the food that we are eating. Complex carb, yes, but Gomti, a very good point to think about is, if millets are complex carb, isn't wheat also a complex carbohydrate? Until unless you are comparing it with refined, that is refined wheat flour, that is maida, even wheat flour is complex carbohydrate. In fact, if you Google, you will find pasta is considered as one of the complex carbohydrate. So the grain that we are eating is same. Neetu, fiber is more than wheat. You can add more wheat bran to your wheat flour. You will have same amount of fiber. You can add more spinach to your wheat flour, or maybe lauki, that ghee to your wheat flour. You will have more fiber. So these are all myths created by the industry to sell you something that was not selling in the market. We need to be more aware about it. Madhu, I think you have missed the point. The glycemic index of millet is 77, dear. Anything above 70 is considered as high glycemic. And the glycemic index of ragi is 54 to 104. Now let's understand what is glycemic load. So this is again very important. Something which has low glycemic index, but you are eating it in more quantity. Irrespective of having low glycemic index, it will put more load on your body. So that is known as glycemic load. Okay, I at no point intend to say that millets are not good. I'm just trying to tell you, let's understand myth and fact. Okay. Now coming to the next point. This is the nutrition information of ruby roti, wheat, ragi, everything. So I'll not be talking about ruby roti. I just want you to understand the carbohydrate of your millets. So wheat has 61 carbohydrate per 100 gram, ragi has 69, bajra has 64, and jowar has 66. So the carbohydrate content, do you see? It's almost same as wheat, ragi, bajra, jowar. Okay. Now, let's understand about ragi. People love ragi and they always call it as a miracle food for diabetes. Ragi, in fact, once the person is diagnosed with diabetes, first thing all the relative and the neighbors will recommend, oh, give him ragi ki roti. Give her ragi ki roti. And then the moment you give ragi ki roti, you see the spikes for 300, 400. Why? Let's see ragi. Ragi is very high in carbs. That is 72% per serving. So if you're eating 200 gram ragi, 200 ka 72% is carbs. Ragi falls into moderate to high glycemic index. That means ragi can cause instant spike. Plus, because it is high in carbs, there is very low satiety because of high carbs. So the ragi, which has been often termed as the miracle food, is not actually the miracle food. Even all the millets together. So if you want to talk about those 5 millets, which are very famously trending thanks to the millet man of India, even those 5 millets, I have tested on CGM, continuous glucose monitor. They give equal amount of spike. Okay. Now I want to ask from all of you, is ragi actually miracle food for diabetes? Do you believe is ragi actually miracle food for diabetes? So the intent of sharing all of this with all of you is to understand. Not at any point do we want to tell you you need to stop eating millets. You need to eat millets. One of the person in the very starting of the webinar shared very beautiful thing about millets. Millets are now more sustainable. That the way millets are grown, it helps the because we eventually will be out of water. So millets don't require a lot of water. So the way they are grown, that is all good. But what we need to understand is emotions, myth, fact. I am eating millets because I'm emotional about how they are grown. That's a separate thing. I'm eating millets. I know the fact that they are not going to cure diabetes, but I'm eating it because I like it. That's a different thing. I'm eating millet because I have been told that it cures diabetes. That is fooling people. There is no food which can cure diabetes. In fact, if anybody tells you about, there's a lot of trend going on, weight loss recipe. There is nothing like weight loss recipe. Weight loss has nothing to do with food. It is calorie deficit, calorie increase. You get to know this. Some of you said that food causes diabetes. It is not the food, it's the signs that causes the diabetes, the pancreas, the insulin resistance, continuous spikes that causes diabetes. The food is the poor victim. Also, one thing I want to share here, if food causes diabetes, people in Europe live on breads and sugar. People in UK live on breads and sugar. Maida is like literally their soul food. How come they have less diabetic than India? India, which is a roti eating, uh, chawal eating, and literally millets eating country, has more diabetic. We drink milk, we drink all, we do take all good things. Still, we have more diabetic. Okay, Gomti, very nice point. More population. Then why do we have more diabetic than China also? China also has more population. Physical activity. India is the most physically active state country because of farming. And today, you will find diabetics even in villages. We have small kids who are dying of diabetes in villages because they're not diagnosed. Stress, lack of protein. So we'll keep finding the reason. The only thing is, in India, are we becoming so easily sellable that anybody can come, create propaganda of one thing and sell it to us? We need to understand that. Okay, and with this, let me take you to the next point. This is my own experience with Ruby Roti. When I had Ruby Roti, my sugars were around 140. After having Ruby Roti for 2 hours, this is how my sugars were. So uh, I totally believe that Ruby Roti is very low in glycemic index as they claim, because I've tried it and not once. So when Shri called me and she said she wants me to try Ruby Roti, I said, Shri, I have type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is very different from type 2 diabetes. I need to take insulin. Shri said, I want you to try. I said, okay, it's different, but she still told me that you try it. I tried first time and my sugars came down. But I didn't say anything to Shri. I said, Shri, I need to try it second time before I commit you anything. Because I'm very particular about what I eat. So I tried it again, second time. And when I tried second time, I saw the similar results. And that's how I realized that yes, Ruby roti actually has low glycemic index. In fact, some of the doctors they have talked to, they're shocked that it can have glycemic index of 4. And for that, I'll be handing it over to uh, Dheeraj. Dheeraj, so from here you can share about Navrelia.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Mike, thanks a lot for the talk. I think it was really important. We understand that. I think you made a really good point about the emotional factor as well with millets. As you stated, yes, I think it's important to differentiate between them, climate friendly, and probably I'm pretty sure Dr. Raghu would actually give us a more scientific backing when he talks about it. All of these are there, but then you also really have to put it into context of how you want to use it and what are you actually using it for and how you think is how they're actually affecting your body, right? So thank you for that. Now we'll have Dr. Raghu share his view. He's actually shared the slide deck with me, so I'm going to share my screen.
Sure.
All right. I hope everyone can see my screen. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me, please?
All right. Yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Raghunath.
Wonderful. Thanks, Mehak. That was a wonderful and lively interactive session. And we thank you very much for testing the Ruby roti. First, and also talking about the millets, about the science behind the millets, the goodness of the millets, and the myth that is surrounding the millet, which is making millets look bad. Actually, I agree with you, millets are not bad as far as staple foods are concerned. But when you say it is a miracle food, that's when the problem comes, because people will think that's going to cure everything. So I think we have to move away from that. But as a grain, as a family of staple foods, millets are good. Are they better than rice? Yes. Are they better than wheat? Yes. And also, as you mentioned, the stress that the world is facing right now, the water stress, what we call, the perfect solution for that is millets. Because 1 kilogram of rice requires close to 4,000 liters of water to produce it. 1 liter of wheat requires around 1,500 liters of water. 1 kilogram of millets requires just 600 kilograms. So it's like unbelievably low as far as the water requirement is concerned. So, and the second thing is they're extremely resistant to deciduous climates. So even if you have a drought, the produce will not go down drastically as we see with the other grains. So now let me walk you through what are millets. As I told, millets belong to specific families, different families, and they're omnipresent, meaning throughout the world, particularly in the semi-arid regions, which are water stressed, people have understood that millets can be grown even though they are water stressed areas, sub-Saharan areas, Saharan areas, into subtropical areas.
Sorry, Dr. Raghu. There's a message in the chat box saying that your voice is low. Can you speak up a little? Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So basically, now let's look at what are the things that are good about millets. If you look at, I have 3 sessions there, 3 tabular forms there. Millets are relatively good in fiber, relatively good or very good in having good fats. They are very high in what is called a phytic acid. I'll tell you what it is. High in flavonoids and polyphenols, and high in minerals, extremely high in minerals. Some minerals are extremely high in concentrating iron. Some millets are very good in concentrating calcium because of the properties that they're developed through ages. And now, when we come to the protein content of millet is low. And as Mehak has clearly shown you, the glycemic index and glycemic load of millets are low, or are high, I'm sorry. So basically, the concept that they are low GI and low GL, there is absolutely no proof, that they are low in the glycemic index and the glycemic load. And the other thing that we have to remember is, when people are pushing that low glycemic index and low glycemic load, they might be comparing that to rice. Yes, compared to rice, they're low in glycemic index and low in glycemic load. So if you are a predominantly rice eating population, then yes, these are low in glycemic index and glycemic load, because there is almost a around 15 to 20% decrease in some millets, not all millets. Can I have the next slide, please? So what does the polyphenols do, and what does the phytic acid do? Polyphenols in millets will cause the properties of decreasing the oxidative stress. That is very, very important for cardiovascular disease and also for diabetes, because diabetics, as we have high oxidative stress, you develop what is called a memory. And the more you eat, the more you're prone to become diabetic, the faster. The second thing is the phytic acid has a very specific characteristic feature in that it binds to these complex carbohydrates and prevents these complex carbohydrates to break down into small pieces of glucose. So yes, they are good, but when you look at the response is what we see, we may talk about the science for 100 hours, but what is it that these grains are, when eaten, what is the response that we're getting as far as glucose is concerned? We are not getting the appropriate glucose response that we thought we would get. And as Mehak has clearly elucidated, when you look at the jowar flour, jowar is not considered a millet because it does not belong to the same family of millets. It is a graminea, belongs to the same family as rice. But there are different types of jowar. Sorghum, sweet sorghum has very high glycemic index, and the white jowar has low glycemic index. And so we got to be very careful in how we classify the foods. When you have a glycemic index of jowar of 77 and a glycemic load of 27, and compare that to rice, if you see that it is glycemic index is more or less the same as rice, but the glycemic load is pretty high. Let me get out of this thing and come into my thing. I'm sorry. I'm going to change this. Can you hear me now? This should be better. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, good. So now look at the glycemic load. So for the equal proportions of what you eat, you're going to have almost half of the glycemic load, not exactly half, but almost half glycemic load of rice. So when you compare to rice, it is a good product. So when you're a predominantly rice eating person, and when you switch over to jowar or bajra or ragi, specific type of ragi, you will see a difference. You will see a drop in your blood sugar levels, a little bit, not a whole lot, because the portion size what matters now. When you compare to the wheat, particularly if you don't eat maida, if you eat a different whole flour wheat, then if you look at the glycemic index is 62 and the glycemic load is 23. So almost it's on par with your millets right now. And if you look at oats, the glycemic index of oats are very high, 72, almost like rice. But if you look at the glycemic load, it is 9. But here's the kicker. The problem is the way that oats are prepared makes a significant difference. Not all oats are the same. So if the oats are cut by steel cut method, those oats are good and have a low glycemic index and a low glycemic load, even though their glycemic index is high. But if you go with the rolled oats, their glycemic load is very high. Quinoa, which is mostly grown in South American, that's mostly the staple food for South American countries, which is becoming very popular in India and southeastern countries, and also in the places there where I live in the North America, glycemic index is good. It's 53, it's less than 55, it's good. And the glycemic load is 10.7, almost it's a decent staple food that you can eat. Can I have the next one, please? I hope people did not lose what I mentioned there in that previous slide about idli and upma, the glycemic loads of the dosa, they're pretty high. And now let me talk about the ruby roti. So when I looked at all this, I was thinking from the cardiologist point, when people come to me with the cardiovascular problems, this is the complication that we are seeing, the complication of diabetes. So when diabetes sets in, and if it is not well controlled, and if that non-controllable diabetes or uncontrolled diabetes goes on for about 10 years or 15 years, that's when you start seeing the manifestations of diabetes, which involves almost every organ. And particularly when you come to the heart, we are worried about heart attacks. When you come to the brain, you're worried about the strokes. When you're looking at the kidneys, you're looking at kidney failure. When you're looking at the retina, like you look at retinopathy, loss of vision. So it can affect every organ system in the body, but it doesn't happen on day one. It happens it takes around 10 years. And that's why people think, okay, we are okay because we're not seeing anything, what we call overt signs, meaning your joints will not be extremely painful. Your teeth will not be extremely painful. You don't have severe earaches or headaches with diabetes. So until the bucket gets full, body tends to adjust itself. Now, the problem is when we have to come up with a food product, we want to have a food product which is good for diabetics, and we want to have a food product that is low in glycemic index and low in glycemic load. I'm not going to go into the glycemic index and glycemic load. So how low can you go? The best thing is zero. But zero would be going for keto product, and that keto products have proven not to be good for people, both for diabetics or non-diabetics, because they cause significant problems with cardiovascular diseases. So we're going to not talk a lot about the keto food, but what we are coming out, the world is seeing is we have proteins which are good for the body. We have good fats. Cardiovascular societies have come up with what are called good fats, which are unsaturated fats, which are good for you. And now the world is going towards what are called good carbohydrates. So what are good carbohydrates? The carbohydrates which have a tepid rise, which do not spike your glucose. So you want to have a complex carbohydrate. So every carbohydrate is made of glucose molecules. When you have these glucose molecules as a building block, the most important thing is how many of these glucose molecules attach to form a molecule, form a structure, bind together solid. So the more the molecules, the complex the carbohydrate. And this is extremely important for you. Simple carbohydrate, the simplest carbohydrate is a glucose. The complex carbohydrate is your lettuce or broccoli or anything green leafy vegetables. You cannot digest some of them. So when you travel from simple carbs to complex carbohydrates, where you end up will determine how much your glucose spike is going to be. So if you go with glucose, which is the simplest of the carbs, you have a super spike. If you go with cellulose, which is extremely complex carbohydrate, you'll have almost no glucose spike. But you need some glucose spike. You need some glucose in the body because every cell requires glucose to survive. The problem with diabetes is not glucose. The problem with diabetes, simply put, is the amount of glucose that is present in the blood is very high compared to the amount of glucose that we push into the cells where we require glucose for survival. So now we want to give a food that is not going to cause the spike, but is going to give adequate amount of glucose so that the body will utilize that glucose and will be happy. And in our quest, our team, we have worked for almost 2.5 years, looking at the different flours, looking at the glucose responses, as Mehak was telling, looking at the glucose responses after eating, both at 90 minutes, 120 minutes. Then after going, we went even for 4 hours to look at the spike. And then what we found was a product which can come up with a very low glycemic index and a glycemic load. And that is what is called ruby roti. So now this is the Indian Institute of Millets Research and the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. They published a paper. They have given the glycemic indices and the protein content in their website and in this paper. And if you look at it, look at all the millets. If you see that the protein content is barely around 14% for amaranth, that is the maximum that you can see. 14% is the maximum protein that you can get from millet. So is it a good source of protein? Not really. Is it an average, a decent source? Yes, it is. Because when you compare the protein content of millets with egg, how many people think egg is a good protein? I mean, I want to become Mehak for a second. How many people think egg is a good source of protein? Amaranth is not millet, yes. So is your pearl millet. It is not a millet, but they're clubbed under amaranth. And this is coming from Indian Institute of Millets. Okay. So they said like an egg is good. You know, the amount of protein that you get from egg is 11% with the yolk and 13% with white of the egg. So if you eat an egg, 100 grams of egg, if you eat the white of the egg, you'll get only 13%. So this is how the misconceptions go. Exactly, like 6 grams per egg, like, yeah, that may be like, I mean, what we have. So the amount of protein that you get per 100 grams of egg is not very high. But the protein content of millets is equivalent to eggs. And so if you say like, now, I want to have an alternative for egg, I want to get good protein content, yes, like millets are good. But when you come to the glycemic index, look at the range they are hiding under. 50 to 60, 55 to 65, 70 to 85, 70 to 80%. The finger millet, like which is your ragi, and then the pearl millet, which is the bajra, and then like now you have the foxtail, which is the closest millet like now that you have, which is good for diabetics. So, and then compare that with the ruby roti that we created. The protein content of ruby roti is 34%, almost 3 times the protein in egg. Let's go with the egg. Like I'm not gonna make millets look any bad. So, and look at the glycemic index of ruby roti, 4.4. You cannot go any lower. And if you go back one slide, like if you look at the amount of carbohydrates that are present in ruby roti, we have a net carbs of 19. 19 grams per 100 grams is net carbs. So the carbs that you get in ruby roti are excellent carbs. And then the fiber is 20%. And what we did with ruby roti is an excellent mix of both the soluble and the insoluble fiber so that you do not have the bloating or you do not have the constipation. And the second thing is like we have an extremely high satiety index. Mehak was telling about the satiety index of a food. Once you eat a food, how long you feel full is very vital. And with ruby roti, the satiety index is very high because of the high fiber content and the high protein content. Can I have the next one, please? So let me dive into one study that was published in 2021, in 2009 by American Society of Dietitians. And so what they did was they compared 2 kinds of foods. One with a relatively high glycemic index. So anything greater than 55 is moderate. And then one with a low glycemic index, which is less than 55, which is 34. And they compared the blood sugar spike. What they found was a 23-point difference in the glycemic index. And they had the same portion size. So they were not allowed to eat whatever they want. The portion size is maintained on both the groups. So a 23-point difference from 57 to 34 of the glycemic index led to a 32% decrease in the peak blood sugars. So if you're eating refined wheat, if you're eating ultra-polished rice, the glycemic index goes up to 90 or 95 also sometimes. And if you eat like in the rava, in the idli and the dosa, the glycemic index of the rava is around 90 to 95. So yes, when you are comparing millets like to those things, you will see a 32% decrease, almost a 30% decrease, because that's how much like a difference is there in the glycemic index of these foods. But when it comes to diabetics, millets will cause a significant rise too, because the glycemic index is not lower than 55 and the glycemic load is not less than 10 by any means. Can I have the next one, please? And I'm sorry, could you go back once, please? I'm sorry, I missed it. So now, when you compare the glycemic index of the ruby roti and the millets, there is a 45-point difference in the glycemic index between the millets and the ruby roti. So now your 23-point difference is bringing the peak blood sugar by around 32%, the spike. Now imagine what this 45-point difference is going to make to you. So is it just all talk, or did we do anything? Do we have any proof? Can I have the next slide, please? So if you look like now how Navrelia Foods traveled with ruby roti, this is from the left to the right. That is our travel. That is our history. So when we first started, when we started mixing and matching these 24 ingredients and the proportions. So if you look at the top spike on the left side, if everybody can see that, the red spike is the one with a regular roti, and the orange spike is the one with our ruby roti. And we call it like high glycemic, high protein roti. And if you look at it, the spike is very low. And then we tested it on people who have uncontrolled diabetes. The random blood sugar is around 152. And this person was on 3 diabetic medications. And when she ate our ruby roti, look at the spike, 152 to 177. Normally, she has a spike of around 100. 100 milligrams per deciliter was a spike that she is usually used to. She was shocked to see this. And then we have the final product, and we have the results with the glycemic index and the glycemic response. And then what we did was, like, we didn't stop there. We said, like, we're going to have a validation of our product. And the best validation would be with one of the 6 food labs in the world, which are qualified to give the glycemic index and test the glycemic index in the appropriate way, which is the in vivo, experimental in vivo, having live subjects, non-diabetic people, testing the product compared with the glucose. And this was done in Oxford, at Oxford Brookes University. And we got a phenomenal response of 4.4 of glycemic index and around 0.5 of glycemic load. How did we achieve this? There were 178 trials, almost 25 nutritional tests, and then we mixed and matched 20 ingredients to have an excellent nutritional profile. We wanted to have a low glycemic index, a very low glycemic load, a very high protein content, extremely good fat proportions. And the fat that we want to have is, we want to have a low saturated fat, and we want to have a very high portion of unsaturated fat. So these are all the recommendations of American Heart Association and American Diabetes Association. Are we complying? Is Ruby Roti complying with both these organizations? 100%. And we actually exceeded like those recommendations. So if I have to summarize the Ruby Roti, it has the lowest glycemic index of a non-keto product, lowest glycemic load, very high protein content. Protein content is 34 grams per 100 grams. High fiber, 19% fiber. And as I told you, again, a good portion or good proportions of both soluble and insoluble fiber. Extremely high satiety index, which is extremely good for diabetics. Very good load of unsaturated fatty acids. And it's not a keto product. Can I have the next slide, please? So now we are so confident of the product. And since we have got the validation, not only of the best lab, the best food lab, one of the best food labs in the world, but also we have many customers who've been using this product, and we're extremely happy. And also the endocrinologists who have actually treated them are extremely happy with the product. And our challenge is very simple. Test our roti with millets or with rice or with wheat or any of the staple product that you're used to. And we stand by the product, and we are so proud of the product, and we are so confident of the product that we are giving you the methodology to test, which is normally done in the labs. Prepare your meal, get your pre-meal blood sugar, eat the meal, use the same amount of side dishes. If you are used to curries, use the same curries. If you're used to some other stuff, use the same amount of those things also, the side dishes. Then wait for 90 minutes, check your blood sugar response, and then let me calculate the spike. Compare that with, first do with rice or wheat, or you can, whichever order you want to, and then compare and see, and the proof is in the pudding. If you're happy, be part of our community, and we'll be very happy and to serve you. Next slide, please. So here, okay, I have a question here. Can I answer that question here, Dheeraj, or you want me to wait?
No, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Somebody was saying, what about beetroot sugars? Sugar is sugar, no matter where you get it from. Either beetroot, sugar cane, or from any fruit, or if you're going to get it from honey, or even jaggery. The only difference is if this sugar, which is sucrose, which is...
I'm sorry. No, please go.
So sugar, table sugar, which is 50% glucose and 50% fructose, no matter where you get from. And that sucrose is present in every sugar product that you eat. If it is mixed with fiber, which happens when jaggery, the glycemic index may be a little lower. But sugar is a sugar is a sugar.
Dr. Raghu, just a quick clarification. So I see Madhu Bharati Reddy. So probably maybe there is a Singaporean flatbread or something like that, which you're not familiar with. So Rugi Roti is something, a product name that we created. If it actually coincides with some Singaporean Malaysian and Singaporean flatbread, it's just a coincidence. And so yeah, just want to clarify that that's not what we're serving, or what we're offering as a product.
I have an interesting question here, though. Why Indian doctors are not they took that away, or not supporting this, or not recommending this product? We just started this product. This is a recent product that came into the market. And so it takes some time for good products to be accepted, because what Mehak was telling about is the misconceptions that have been floating around now in the world right now. And people, it's hard for people to believe in good products when they come out in the market. And so it takes some time. And our simple challenge is way out there. Just test for yourself. If you like it, it's up to you. Don't believe in anybody. Just ask what it is. And if you have only two populations where you got to be a little bit careful is if you are having kidney problems, advanced kidney problems. That's where you got to be careful about the amount of protein that you take. The average advice, the recommendation of the amount of protein that a person can take is 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram of weight per day. That is the amount of protein that is advisable. And Indians, we fall a lot lower than that. We do not meet that. So unless you have advanced kidney problem, you do not have a problem with the ruby roti.
Yeah. So, sorry, just a second. So we, as I've said at the beginning, please do type in your questions in the Q&A. Looks like there are some questions in the chat, which we'll actually go through. And before we actually get into it, I'd like to thank Dr. Raghu for sharing his views on the millets and introducing the ruby roti as well. It was really interesting when you actually went into details of, not really blanketly saying that millets are bad, but you actually have to understand the context and see if it's actually working. And I thought it was a nice way to actually end the talk with actually throwing out an open challenge where people can actually test it for themselves and not really believe everything that they're hearing or seeing, even from us, right? So the idea is for you to actually keep the power in your own hands, try out something, and don't just blindly go by what people are saying, right? So I think that's a very powerful message to end the talk on. So we'll start taking questions now. If you haven't actually typed in the questions yet, please do so. So there's one: can millets be consumed 3 times a day? So up to you. So who wants to take that question?
I'll just answer that. It's very safe to consume millet 3 times a day. But what is more important is knowing why you are consuming millets. If you're consuming it under the pressure that it is going to cure any kind of disease, then most likely you are going to torture yourself. I know a mother who was actually feeding their child millets day and night. And this girl came to me, and then one day I told her, I want you to go and eat with your friends. And she asked me, can I eat like normal kids? I thought I was only supposed to eat millets. So if you're going to eat millets just to torture yourself, I would rather have other grain or maybe ruby roti mix. But if you're eating it because you like it, please feel free to have it 3 times a day. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Mehak. So I'm just going to take the questions as they come. So the next question is, if a person is fat, I presume obese over here when the person went. So this question is from Mohammed Kaif, and suffering from type 2 diabetes, any suggestion?
You want me to take it?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
So first is like, now you have to go with what scientific analysis is. Number one, you want to have, first is food. Number two is food. Number three is food. The type of food that goes into it determines like how you're going to have your control of diabetes, number one. Number two, the most important thing is exercise. People have to understand exercise at a different level. When you do the exercise, is very important for diabetics. And it has been shown unequivocally that exercise immediately after eating, when your blood sugars are climbing, has the best response to decrease the glucose curve. Why is it so? Science says that as the glucose goes up, you produce insulin. But when you have like insulin resistance, which happens mostly in type 2 diabetes, your insulin will not be able to push the amount of glucose, meaning the receptor is loaded. It cannot function properly. So the insulin, even though it is there, it is not able to push the glucose into the cell. Now you have a lot of glucose into the body. Then now when you exercise immediately after eating, the glucose bypasses this insulin receptor. So it just takes a different route. And the muscle actually sucks the glucose in the blood and decreases the amount of glucose that is present in the blood. And muscle needs glucose. And there, the excess glucose can be stored as glycogen or whatever, and it can be used for energy processes. So when you exercise, so what we're recommending now, both for cardiology, for diabetics, is exercise immediately after eating. Do not eat and lie down. And the type of exercise is also important. You want to do aerobic exercise. You don't want to stress yourself too much after you eat. So you want to go for aerobic exercise and look up what is called zone 2 exercise. If there is one thing about exercise that you want to know, look up zone 2 exercise is where you want your heart rate to be around 70% of your maximum heart rate. 70% of your heart rate. And so just try to do that, not more than that. And that should decrease the amount of glucose spike.
Dr. Raghu, thanks a lot for answering that question. I hope that answer actually also helps with some of the questions around, what are some tips to actually control diabetes? I think there are 3 or 4 questions related to the same theme. So if I had to summarize, food and exercise, both of them equally important. And in terms of food, both Dr. Raghu and Mehak have actually talked about, looking for low glycemic index and low glycemic load foods, right? There's some questions of ingredients of ruby roti, composition of ruby roti. We'll just post the relevant website links over here. So we are on it, and you'll see that in the chat box. And then there was some question on I'm not a diabetic and I consume finger millet very early morning. Is it good? That's the question.
What is that? I'm sorry. What is the question?
Chinmay Dash is asking, I'm not a diabetic, but I consume finger millet very early in the morning. Is it good?
Good.
Yeah, if you're not a diabetic, like yes, like I mean, millets are good. That's what I told. I mean, versus idli or dosa or upma, yes, they're better. They're good. Like because if you consume idli, if you look at idli, like idli has two things. One is the rice and like the urad dal. Urad dal is very good, but the proportion of urad dal makes the difference. And we have a rice which is powdered. So remember one thing, one more takeaway point. The smaller the particle, the higher the glycemic index. So when you go for refined to ultra refined, you go from unprocessed, processed to ultra processed foods. So when you go to the ultra processed foods, like that spike of glucose is going to be extremely high. So you want to go with as raw a product as possible, as unprocessed a product as possible. So yes, you can eat finger millet, yes, if you're not a diabetic.
Hashmat asked, so please explain some tips to manage blood sugar levels. Hashmat, just in the interest of time, we have done a few other webinars as well. There's the last webinar, Diwali, celebrating Diwali with diabetes. There are lots of tips there. And there's a previous webinar that we had done with Mehak as well. There's some tips there as well. If you're not part of the WhatsApp community, please do join the community. We do post some helpful tips there. Also, all of these recordings would actually be available on YouTube and also on the company website. Probably we'll post that link in the community in a couple of days' time. And then there's one other question I thought which was really interesting on how is ruby roti flour different from a keto flour? And after this, we'll take one more question. Dr. Raghu, you might want to maybe answer it in a short space, primarily because that's one of the webinar topics that we have, right? So again, the fad around the ketos and how people are being misled. And in your own practice, you're seeing a lot of problems with keto diet, cardiology complications. So if you can answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, keto diet has gained popularity in the last decade. Everybody like went after keto diet. It makes sense. Like now, yes, we are not going to give diabetics any carbohydrate, and so your blood sugar should be excellent. Yes, it is excellent product for diabetes. There's no question about it. But what you're doing is like you're substituting a carbohydrate with what? With fats. Because you can only eat protein to a certain level. After that, you cannot eat. And so when you're eating fat, like when the fat content increases, what we found was interesting. Like last year, there was a study which came out. It said 100% increase in the incidence of coronary artery disease defined as greater than 50% blockage, and a 50% increase in the presentation of heart attacks, which are blockage, 100% blockage of the blood vessels. We have not seen like this kind of data in a long, long time. After 70s, 1970s, the Society of Cardiology have not seen these numbers. And that's where we said we have to put a break to this keto mania. And the other thing is, you are substituting fats for carbohydrates. Yes, body loves fats. There's no second thought about it. Fats are energy-dense particles. I'm not disputing that we have to actually have fats in the body, and you have to go into fat burning mode. That is the most important thing, like that you require. But where do you stop? So as you limit yourself, like to the ketones, which is the keto diet, if they are at a certain level, that's okay. But it's very hard to maintain that keto diet with that ketone level with the keto diet, and the ketone levels go up significantly, and then the fat content goes up, and that's where you have the problem. And that's where we're seeing. And when you see people taking very high levels of protein, trying to decrease the amount of fat, their kidneys take a hit. So as I told you, like now your protein content like it should be around 0.8 to 1 gram per kilogram per day. Keep that in mind. Extremely high endurance athletes will require around 1.2. Look at the difference, 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram per day. See that's very tight. Protein is very tightly controlled. Yes, you need protein. You need good protein. And people are going for plant protein, excellent. But thing is, there's a limitation that you can take with the protein. And then there's no limit for fats. And there's no limit for carbohydrates. But both of them are causing a problem. So as I told you in my talk, the key note that you have to remember is good carbs. You want to have complex carbohydrates in your meal. That way you can increase the amount of carbohydrates that you eat so that you don't have a glucose spike. And then at the same time, you can limit the amount of fats that you eat, and you can mix and match the type of fats that you want to eat. So you can have a little bit of saturated fats also when you have extremely good load of carbohydrate in the body.
Right. Okay, so thanks a lot, Dr. Raghu. And we'll end with a question to Mehak. Mehak, because you are a type 1 diabetic, right? That's how you actually were so passionate about this and you wanted to help back the community as well. And I presume you're always using a CGM and carb counting is extremely important for you. So what has been your experience, let's say, trying out different millets or, or any other food? So what has really helped you and how do you actually go about what you normally do?
So I'll tell you, initially I loved millets because it was just adding another grain into your palate. Now, I wanted to move out of rice and uh, wheat. I wanted to see what all we can eat and how it impacts us. But when I saw all the misnomers around millet about, first of all, I don't know how many of you are drinking fermented millet, which is very, very popular these days in India. It is so bad in taste, it's not even palatable. Then I saw that unnecessary millets are being oversold to the market. And can I share one thing, Dheeraj, very important about millets?
Sure, please.
Where you buy your millets from matter more than what millet you consume. In North India, 90% millets are highly polished. So when you are eating those highly polished millets, it is giving you more or same amount of spike. And that's when my eyes opened that okay, it's a very big industry that is trying to sell millets to people with diabetes. So that deterred me from over consuming millets and I stopped at that time. I still love millets when it comes to being little more creative. So if I want to eat, let's say, rice, I will add I'll take some rice, I'll add some millets to it, and I'll add some vegetables to it. So this way the glycemic index gets balanced. But I buy all my millets from recognized sources only, which sell non-polished millets. That's something very important for me. On CGM, which I continuously do, and I monitor all my food. I did low carb diet. So like Dr. Raghunath talked about low carb diet. I did it for 3 years and it's the worst thing I've done to my body. For 3 years, I was on keto diet and I started attracting acid reflux, water retention, PCOD because of low carb diet. And that's when I realized the problem is not the carbs. The problem is something else. It's about understanding the science of diabetes and making changes. Some of the very good aspects Dr. Raghunath shared was exercise. Please exercise. Hydrate if you can. Most of the Indians don't actually drink the required amount of water they're supposed to drink in a day. So I don't know if you people reflect on your water intake. See what food is causing insulin spikes in your body. These are all way more important. And I think Dheeraj has also given a poll question to you. Do you still believe that millets can control or reverse diabetes? I think it's good time that we answer this question. Let's see if we have been able to break this myth.
Okay. I'll just give a few more seconds and then I'll stop the poll. It's completely fine. I mean, this is an anonymous poll. We just wanted to understand, what you actually think. So, yeah. Okay, I'll end the poll now. So, share results. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so 67% now totally believe, and 33% who believe that millet can reverse or cure diabetes. I would want your belief to come true someday because I don't want people to have broken hearts. But in case if not, don't worry. There are people who are out there who are there to help you. Don't feel demotivated. Just reach out to the right person. Over to you, Dheeraj.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Mehak. And so, as we actually said, as we already told you, we'd shared a recording of this webinar. And also, if you wanted to reach out to either Mehak or Dr. Raghu, please feel free to do so. Mehak, if you can actually type in your email address or where you'd like people to reach out to you if they wanted to, please do. And to reach out to Dr. Raghu, you could actually message or send an email to this email address. Right. So Dr. Raghu would be monitoring this email address. So if you wanted to ask any particular questions, then please feel free to do so. We've already run 12 minutes over. So I'd really like to thank the panelists for actually staying over. Thanks a lot. And it was really useful I hope it was really useful for the attendees as well. And one last thing. So I'd really like to thank Arvind. Thanks a lot, Arvind. We didn't realize that you're actually part of this webinar. And thanks a lot for actually showering such great praise on Ruby Roti. I really appreciate that. It's really heartening to see people like yourself who found a lot of help with managing their blood sugar levels. With that, I really thank everyone. Thank you. See you in the next webinar.
Dr. Raghunath wants to say something.
Yes, yeah, Dr. Raghu.
One last thing is, when you research on a food product, as Mehak was telling, try to read about the product before you make a decision. Do not believe because there is something out there on YouTube or because there's something like a paper ad or something like that. Talk to your physicians. They are the ones like who are out there looking for you. Talk to them and ask them like, no, is this a good product? Whenever you come up with a product, whenever you research a product, just read about it thoroughly. And like you can Google and see like whether the product is disclosing everything what is telling. And then like what are the pros and cons of each product. For every product, even for our Ruby Roti, yes, like just the lowest glycemic index, lowest glycemic load, excellent protein profile, excellent fat profile, fantastic product like for diabetes. There's no question about it. But it's coming from me, like who invented the product, or from a team like who made the product. But I urge you to go research about what is good for diabetes, as Mehak was telling. She found in a rude way, like I mean, she in a very bad way, like that things are not working for her. I do not want people, and that was the whole premise of us at Navrelia Foods trying to come up with a product like this. We do not want you to suffer and then like make a choice. I want you to, like, because this age of information, the information is out there. Just go out, look out, find out for yourself and see if this is the appropriate food for you.
Right. With that, I think we'll end the webinar here. Again, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you in the next webinar.